The morning sun cast a soft glow over the Carver Ranch, painting the dry fields in tones of gold and rust. Dust drifted lazily through the air as 12-year-old Luke Carver knelt beside a restless chestnut stallion. The horse's name was Ember, a creature both feared and admired in the small Texas town of Redstone Creek. His muscles trembled beneath his scarred coat, and his deep eyes carried a wild fire that no one had ever tamed. Luke's small, calloused hands worked carefully around the horse's leg, wrapping a fresh bandage while whispering in a calm, steady voice. The boy didn't fear Ember. He understood him in a way no one else did. From the fence line, Thomas Carver, Luke's grandfather, watched quietly. His weathered face carried the weight of decades spent under the sun, and behind his calm eyes lay a history of loss. Once, Thomas had been one of the best horse trainers in the county, until an accident took both a prize-winning horse and part of his heart. Since then, he had vowed never to step near a racetrack again. Yet here he was, watching his grandson prepare the one creature everyone said could never be ridden. "You'll get yourself hurt one of these days, boy," Thomas muttered, but there was no anger in his tone, only fear. Luke looked up, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "He's not dangerous, Grandpa. He's just scared, like you said once. Fear makes even the strongest horses lose their way." His words hung in the warm air for a moment before Thomas looked away, unwilling to admit how much truth there was in them. The boy's innocence both comforted and frightened him. He could see the same spark in Luke that once drove him, the same need to prove something to the world. Ember snorted, kicking up a small cloud of dust, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he lowered his head slightly toward Luke, as if surrendering for the first time. It was a fragile truce, a silent understanding between two souls that had both been hurt and left behind. The connection between them was something deeper than training. It was trust born out of shared loneliness. As the sun climbed higher, a faint echo of laughter drifted from the nearby stables. Men from the Hayes Ranch were already preparing for the upcoming Silver Trail Derby, the most prestigious horse race in the region. Luke paused, his eyes catching the gleam of the polished saddles and silk uniforms. He knew those riders came from money and legacy, things he and his grandfather never had. But as Ember's breath brushed against his arm, Luke felt something shift inside him. He didn't need wealth or fame. He only needed one chance, one race, to show them all what Ember could do. And though he didn't know it yet, that chance was closer than he ever imagined. The next morning brought a wind that carried both the smell of rain and the hum of distant excitement. The Silver Trail Derby was only 5 days away, and for the people of Redstone Creek, it was more than just a race. It was pride, legacy, and reputation wrapped in a single event. At the town's general store, men leaned over counters and women exchanged quiet gossip about who would win this year. Everyone knew the favorite was Randall Hayes's horse, a sleek black stallion named Majestic Star, trained by the seasoned Frank Dawson. No one mentioned Luke Carver or his horse. They didn't have to. The idea alone was laughable. Back at the Carver Ranch, Thomas sat at the kitchen table, sipping bitter coffee from a chipped mug. The wooden floor creaked as Luke entered, wiping the dirt from his boots. "Grandpa," he began carefully, "I'm thinking about entering the Derby." The old man froze. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the soft drip of rain from the roof. Then Thomas set his cup down slowly. "Luke, you know what that race is. Those men, they don't play fair. You and that horse will be torn apart out there." Luke swallowed hard, his voice trembling but determined. "I know. But Ember deserves a chance. So do I." He hesitated, looking down. "They call him wild, broken, useless. They said the same about you once, didn't they?" Thomas's jaw tightened. The boy's words pierced something deep inside him, a memory he'd buried years ago of a race gone wrong, a horse lost in chaos, and the guilt that followed. He wanted to tell Luke no. But how do you tell a boy to stop believing in the very thing that keeps him alive? Later that afternoon, Luke led Ember to the edge of the old practice field. The wind whipped across the dry plains, and the fences groaned under its force. The horse reared, his powerful hooves striking the earth as if challenging the world itself. "Easy, boy," Luke whispered, steadying him with a hand. Slowly, carefully, he climbed into the saddle, something he had never dared to do before. Ember tensed, muscles coiled like springs. For a moment, Luke thought the horse would throw him off. But then, the stallion moved forward. One step, then another, until finally they were running. The world blurred around them. Dust, sky, wind, all blending into one heartbeat. Luke could feel every muscle beneath him, every ounce of power and pain in Ember's body. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't graceful. But it was real. For the first time, they were one. When they finally stopped, Thomas stood at the fence, watching. He didn't speak, but there was something new in his eyes, pride, and perhaps a flicker of hope. That night, while the world slept, Thomas went to the barn and ran his hand over Ember's mane. "If you're gonna do this, boy," he whispered to the horse, "then you better show them what a Carver's heart really means." And from the darkness, the horse exhaled softly, as if he understood. By the third day before the Derby, whispers had already spread through Redstone Creek. A poor boy with a half-wild horse was daring to compete against Randall Hayes's thoroughbreds. To most, it was a joke, a story to laugh about over beer and smoke at the saloon. But to a few, especially those who still remembered the older Thomas Carver, it was something different. It was curiosity, maybe even a trace of hope. Still, in a town where legacy meant everything, faith in a Carver name had long gone cold. That morning, Luke practiced alone on the outskirts of the ranch. The track was uneven, carved out of dust and stubborn weeds. Ember moved with raw strength but little control, snorting and jerking his head whenever the reins pulled too tightly. Sweat ran down Luke's neck as he whispered, "Easy, boy. We just have to trust each other." Each failed lap chipped away at his confidence, but he refused to stop. He could almost hear the voices from town echoing in his head. "That kid's gonna break his neck. That horse belongs in the wild." Every word burned deeper, fueling his resolve. By noon, Thomas appeared at the edge of the field, his hat casting a shadow across his lined face. He didn't call out, just watched. For a long while, he let the boy struggle. Finally, he sighed, stepped forward, and said quietly, "You're fighting him, Luke. You don't fight a horse like Ember. You listen." The boy pulled back on the reins, breathing hard. "I am listening," he shot back, frustration in his tone. "He just doesn't want to listen to me." Thomas's voice softened. "Then you haven't earned his trust yet. You can't control what you don't understand." The word stung, but Luke knew he was right. As the sun dipped lower, Thomas joined him inside the corral. Together, they walked beside Ember, moving slow, letting the horse feel their rhythm. It wasn't about commands anymore. It was about patience. Luke began to match his breathing to the horse's, steady and calm. Gradually, Ember's muscles relaxed. For the first time that day, the stallion's eyes softened, and he lowered his head in quiet surrender. It was a small victory, but to Luke, it felt like a miracle. That night, at the edge of the porch, Thomas lit his old pipe and stared at the horizon. The sky burned orange and violet, fading into deep blue. "You know," he said without turning, "the last time I trained a horse like that, it cost me everything I had." Luke sat beside him, curious. What happened? The old man didn't answer right away. He took a slow drag from his pipe, the smoke curling into the night air. "Some scars," he finally said, "don't heal even when no one can see them." Luke looked down at his hands, the same hands that had bandaged Ember's wounds, the same ones now covered in blisters. He wondered what kind of scars his grandfather carried, and if, by the end of this race, he'd have his own to bear. The morning sun rose over Redstone Creek, casting light across the Carver Ranch like a promise and a warning. Luke was already awake, brushing the dust from Ember's coat. The horse's breathing was calm now, his trust slowly earned through long hours of patience and quiet understanding. Luke could feel their bond strengthening, but he also knew time was running short. The Silver Trail Derby was only 2 days away. Every moment mattered. A distant rumble of wheels drew Luke's attention. A sleek black car approached along the dirt road, its polished surface gleaming against the roughness of the land. No one from town ever came this far out, especially not in a car like that. The vehicle stopped, and from it stepped Clara Hayes, the daughter of Randall Hayes, the wealthiest man in 3 counties. She was dressed in crisp riding clothes, her hair neatly tied back, and yet her eyes held a softness that didn't match her father's sharp arrogance. Luke froze, unsure whether to greet her or hide. "You must be Luke Carver," she said gently, stepping closer. "I've heard quite a bit about you." Her tone was kind, but there was an edge of pity Luke immediately recognized, the kind people use when they don't think you'll succeed. "If you came to tell me not to race," Luke muttered, "you can save your breath. I've already made up my mind." Clara smiled faintly. "Actually, I came to see the horse everyone keeps talking about." She approached Ember, moving carefully. The stallion's ears flicked back, his body tensing. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "Wild, but beautiful." From the porch, Thomas Carver watched the exchange with quiet suspicion. He recognized her last name before she even introduced herself. Hayes. Trouble, he thought. He didn't trust anyone from that family. When Clara turned to greet him, Thomas only nodded, his tone cold. "Your father still racing to prove how rich he is?" She didn't flinch. "He's racing because it's all he knows," she replied softly. "But maybe it's time someone reminded him what the heart of this sport really means." For the next hour, Clara stayed, watching as Luke and Thomas worked with Ember. She asked careful questions, listened more than she spoke, and by the time she left, a quiet understanding had formed between her and Luke. Before stepping back into her car, she looked at him and said, "Tomorrow, at the registration. Don't let them scare you. You belong there as much as any of them." Her words echoed in Luke's mind long after the car disappeared down the dirt road. That night, Luke couldn't sleep. He replayed her voice over and over. "You belong there." For a boy who'd spent his whole life being told the opposite, those words felt heavier than gold. Out in the barn, Ember shifted restlessly, as if he, too, sensed what was coming. The world was watching now. And when the sun rose again, the race that would change everything would finally begin. The morning of the Silver Trail Derby broke with a sky the color of steel. Clouds hung heavy over Redstone Creek, and the scent of rain mingled with the tension in the air. Along the grand track owned by Randall Hayes, carriages and trucks lined the fields, each carrying horses groomed to perfection and riders in spotless uniforms. Amid the polished saddles and golden buckles, Luke Carver stood out like a ghost from another world. His boots worn, his shirt faded, his hat far too big for his head. But his eyes burned with quiet fire. Beside him, Ember pawed the ground, every muscle coiled with restless energy. From the announcer's booth, a voice boomed across the loudspeakers, naming each competitor. When Luke's name was called, a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. "That's the Carver boy," someone muttered. "The one with the wild horse." The mockery stung, but Luke didn't look up. He kept his hand on Ember's neck, steadying both the animal and himself. He could feel Thomas's presence behind him, silent, solid, like a mountain. "Don't listen to them," the old man said softly. "Just ride." Then, the sound of hooves, heavy, rhythmic, practiced, signaled the arrival of Randall Hayes and his prized stallion, Majestic Star. Randall rode like a man used to being watched. His white gloves, his perfect posture, even his smile seemed rehearsed. He dismounted near Luke, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Son," he said smoothly, "this race isn't for children or strays. Best you sit this one out before someone gets hurt." His tone dripped with condescension. Luke met his eyes. "We'll see about that." For a moment, the man's smile faltered. Clara Hayes, standing nearby, watched the exchange in silence. When her father turned away, she stepped forward and whispered to Luke, "Ignore him. You're meant to be here." Luke nodded, but his stomach churned. As he led Ember toward the starting gate, the world seemed to narrow. Just the track, the crowd, and the sound of his own heartbeat. The air was thick with dust and anticipation. Even Ember seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. His ears twitched, his chest heaved, but his eyes, those wild, defiant eyes, locked onto the track ahead. A pistol fired. The gates burst open. The race began. Mud flew, hooves thundered, and the crowd roared. Luke leaned forward, gripping the reins as Ember surged forward like lightning. The first curve came fast, too fast, and for a split second Luke felt the horse slipping. Gasps echoed from the stands. But he held on, whispering through gritted teeth, "Trust me, boy, trust me." Ember steadied. His stride lengthened, powerful and unrestrained. For a moment, they were flying, not just racing, but belonging. The laughter had stopped. The crowd was watching. And then, halfway through the second lap, something unexpected happened. Something that would change the course of the race and Luke's life forever. Halfway through the second lap, the world seemed to tilt. Ember's front hoof struck a patch of deep mud, and in an instant, the stallion stumbled. Luke felt the jolt shoot through his legs as the reins snapped tight. Gasps erupted from the stands, some in shock, others in cruel delight. The horse's body twisted, fighting gravity, and for a heartbeat Luke thought it was over. But somehow, through sheer instinct, he shifted his weight, gripping tighter. "Easy. Easy, boy," he cried, his voice raw against the roar of the crowd. Ember regained balance, his hooves pounding again, kicking up clouds of red dust. The fall had cost them time, but not their spirit. From the announcer's booth, voices shouted, "Carver's out. He's falling behind." But Thomas Carver, watching from the rails, didn't move. He knew that look in his grandson's eyes, the same one he'd once had when he rode a horse named River Ghost long ago. He whispered under his breath, "Don't quit, Luke. Don't ever quit." The old man's hands trembled as he gripped the wooden fence, the past flooding back with every thunder of hooves. For years, he'd avoided the sound of a race. Now it echoed through him like a heartbeat he thought he'd lost. Randall Hayes rode far ahead, his face set in smug confidence. To him, this wasn't a competition, it was a spectacle. Proof that legacy always crushed poverty. But something in the crowd began to shift. People who had laughed earlier now leaned forward, watching the boy who refused to fall. Clara, standing by the paddock, held her breath. She could see the dirt streaking Luke's face, the blood on his knuckles, and the fire in his eyes. "Come on, Luke," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. "Show them what heart looks like." Luke tightened his grip on the reins, his whole body aching. The finish line was still far ahead, but something inside him, something stronger than pain or pride, took over. "We're not done yet," he said through gritted teeth. Ember's ears flicked back at his voice, as if he understood. Together, they began to pick up speed. The crowd gasped again as the wild horse surged forward, weaving between the competitors. Hoofbeats thundered like war drums, and for the first time, Majestic Star's shadow wasn't the only one racing for glory. As they neared the final stretch, Randall Hayes turned his head, disbelief flickering across his face. The poor boy from the edge of town was catching up, his ragged shirt soaked in sweat, his eyes locked straight ahead. "No," Randall hissed, urging his stallion faster. But Ember moved with something that couldn't be trained, a raw, desperate will to prove the world wrong. Every muscle burned, every breath came sharp, but Luke didn't let go. The finish line shimmered through the dust like a promise. And then, in one terrifying moment, Randall's horse swerved, his whip striking too close to Ember's flank. The stallion reared with a furious cry. The crowd screamed. Luke's world spun in a blur of motion, light, and pain. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. Silence fell. Heavy, absolute. In that stillness, as the dust settled and the cheers turned to gasps, Luke's eyes fluttered open just enough to see Ember standing over him, trembling but unbroken. The boy tried to speak but could only manage a whisper. "Don't stop, boy. Finish it." The crowd fell into stunned silence as Luke Carver lay motionless on the dirt, his body twisted near the track's edge. The sound of pounding hooves faded into the distance. Every rider except one had passed. For a few unbearable seconds, it seemed like the race was over for him. Then, through the haze of dust and fear, Ember stood still, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on the finish line. The stallion pawed the ground once, twice, and then, with a powerful cry, he began to run. Alone. No rider. No reins. Just pure will. Gasps rippled through the stands as the wild horse everyone had mocked thundered down the final stretch on his own. From the sidelines, Thomas Carver sprinted forward, shouting his grandson's name. But when he saw Ember still running, his steps faltered. Memories collided inside him. The loss of his old horse, the guilt that had haunted him, and now this moment of impossible defiance. His voice cracked as he whispered, "By God, he's finishing it." Tears welled in his weathered eyes, blurring his vision as Ember's mane whipped through the wind like fire. It wasn't just a horse finishing a race, it was redemption itself charging toward the light. Randall Hayes, ahead on Majestic Star, heard the growing roar of the crowd. Confused, he glanced back, and his breath caught. The wild horse was coming. Alone. The sight froze him in place. He whipped his stallion harder, desperate to keep the lead, but it was too late. Ember, driven by something deeper than fear or command, surged forward with impossible strength. The stands erupted, not for the wealthy riders, but for the wild riderless horse that refused to quit. For the first time in years, the people of Redstone Creek cheered not for power, but for heart. Clara Hayes stood at the fence, tears streaming down her face. She didn't see an animal anymore. She saw a bond, a story, a promise kept. "Come on, Ember, do it for him," she whispered. The horse stormed past the finish line, chest first, before collapsing to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The crowd exploded in disbelief and awe. Some shouted that it didn't count, that no rider crossed the line, but others, moved to tears, disagreed. "That horse finished the boy's dream," someone cried. "If that doesn't count, nothing does." Moments later, Thomas reached Luke, kneeling beside him. The boy stirred weakly, his breath ragged. Did we make it?" he whispered. Thomas's voice broke as he took his grandson's hand. "You did, boy. You and that horse. You made it all the way." Luke tried to smile, but his eyes fluttered shut again, his face peaceful, covered in dust and sunlight. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Randall Hayes stood still, hat in hand, humbled. Across the track, Ember lifted his head once more, as if looking for Luke, and let out a low, trembling neigh that echoed across the valley. And in that sound, every soul there understood, the race was never about victory. It was about heart. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 8, where we see the aftermath, Luke's recovery, the town's reaction, and how Ember's act begins to change everything for the people of Redstone Creek? Rain fell softly over Redstone Creek the morning after the Derby, washing away the dust and noise of the day before. The stands were empty now, the banners torn and fluttering weakly in the wind. But in the quiet barn at the edge of town, life stirred again. Luke Carver lay on a makeshift cot, his head bandaged, his breathing shallow but steady. The doctor had said he'd live, though it might take time before he could walk again. At his side sat Thomas, his rough hands folded, his eyes heavy from a sleepless night. The storm had passed, but something inside him still trembled, not from fear, but from awe. Outside, Ember rested under the dim glow of a lantern. The stallion's coat, once wild and fiery, was now streaked with mud and sweat. His legs trembled as he stood, refusing to lie down. A stable hand whispered, "That horse doesn't want to rest until the boy wakes." The words carried through the barn like a prayer. When Thomas walked toward him, Ember raised his head, their eyes meeting for a long, silent moment. The old man reached out and placed a trembling hand against the horse's muzzle. "You saved him," he said softly. "You finished what I couldn't." By midday, the town began to gather outside the barn. People who had laughed now stood quiet, their hats in their hands. Randall Hayes was among them, his usual confidence replaced by something unfamiliar, humility. "The boy's tougher than I gave him credit for," he admitted. "And that horse, there's not another like him in this county." His words weren't an apology, but for a man like Randall, they were close enough. Clara Hayes stepped forward, carrying a basket of food and a folded note. "He did what no one else dared to," she said softly. "He showed us what courage really means." Inside, Luke stirred. His eyes fluttered open to the dim light and the familiar smell of hay. When he tried to sit up, pain rippled through his body, but Thomas was already there to steady him. "Easy now," the old man murmured. "You're safe." Luke blinked, confused. "Did we win?" Thomas hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You did better than win." He gestured toward the doorway, where townsfolk were gathering to see him. "You reminded this town what heart looks like." Later that evening, Clara visited Luke privately. She placed a small silver medal on the table beside his bed, the judge's decision. "They called it an honorary finish," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But everyone here knows the truth." Luke looked at the medal, then out toward the barn where Ember stood, his silhouette framed by the fading light. "I didn't do it alone," he whispered. Clara smiled. "No," she said, "but you made everyone believe again." As night settled, the barn glowed softly in the distance. Thomas leaned against the fence, pipe in hand, watching Luke and Ember, boy and horse, both scarred, both unbroken. The old man breathed deep, feeling peace for the first time in years. The race was over, but the story of that wild horse and the boy who wouldn't quit had only just begun. 3 weeks had passed since the Silver Trail Derby, but the story still echoed through every street and diner in Redstone Creek. People who once mocked the Carvers now spoke their names with quiet respect. At the post office, someone had pinned a photograph from the race, Ember charging down the final stretch, riderless but unstoppable. Beneath it, someone had written, "Heart wins where money fails." The phrase spread through the town like wildfire, turning whispers into pride. For the first time in decades, the Carver Ranch wasn't just a memory, it was a symbol of courage. Inside the small farmhouse, Luke Carver sat near the window, one leg still wrapped in bandages, staring out at the fields where Ember grazed. The boy's face had grown thinner, his body still healing, but his eyes carried the same spark that had driven him into that race. "You should be resting," Thomas muttered as he entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one filled halfway with milk for Luke. "Can't rest forever," Luke replied quietly. "Ember's getting restless. He wants to run again." Thomas chuckled. "You both nearly died, and all you can think about is running. You really are a Carver." That afternoon, a letter arrived, the envelope sealed with the mark of the Silver Trail Committee. Clara Hayes had sent it herself. Luke unfolded the paper, his heart racing as he read aloud. "In recognition of extraordinary spirit and sportsmanship, we hereby invite Luke Carver and Ember to lead the opening lap of next year's Silver Trail Derby." His voice broke mid-sentence. Thomas smiled, pride softening his rough features. "Looks like they finally learned your name, boy," he said. "Now the question is, What will you do with it? Luke hesitated, staring at the letter. I don't want fame, he said quietly. I just want people to remember that even the smallest of us can matter. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding more than he let on. That's exactly why they will remember. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the soft hum of crickets filling the air. Outside, Ember lifted his head toward the window, as if sensing their words. The late sunlight gleamed across his coat, and for the first time since the race, he looked completely at peace. A few days later, Randall Hayes himself came to the ranch, unannounced. The sight of his black truck rolling up the dirt path made Thomas tense, but Randall stepped out without arrogance this time. He approached Luke and offered a firm handshake. You proved me wrong, son, he said. You and that horse reminded this whole town why we race. In his eyes, pride had been replaced by humility. If you ever need a proper track to train on, my gates are open. Luke nodded, unsure what to say, but gratitude flickered across his face. Even Thomas gave a small nod of approval. That night, as the wind rolled gently through the fields, Luke and Thomas stood by the fence, watching Ember graze under the moonlight. He's not wild anymore, Luke said softly. Thomas smiled. No, he answered. He's free. And so are you. The words lingered in the night air like a blessing, quiet, powerful, eternal. But neither of them knew that the next morning would bring one final test, a moment that would once again prove what the Carver name truly meant. The morning dawned quiet and cold, the kind of silence that comes before change. Luke Carver stood at the fence, wrapped in his old denim jacket, watching the fog roll across the pastures. Ember stood a few yards away, his coat glistening with dew. The stallion's gait had finally returned to strength, his scars now faint against the morning light. It had been nearly a month since the Derby, yet the boy still woke every day with the echo of hooves in his mind. Today, though, felt different, heavier somehow, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Inside the farmhouse, Thomas Carver sat at the kitchen table, reading a letter from the Silver Trail Committee confirming next year's honorary lap. His rough hands trembled slightly as he set it down. "You're really going to do it again?" he asked when Luke entered. The boy nodded. "Not for glory. For him." Thomas's gaze softened. "You remind me of your father," he said quietly. "Always chasing something just out of reach." Luke smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what keeps us alive." The old man chuckled, but his eyes glistened. "Just promise me one thing, boy. This time, come back standing." Later that afternoon, the wind picked up over Redstone Creek, carrying the faint sound of thunder far away. The clouds began to roll, dark and slow. Luke led Ember to the open field, the same place where they had first trained, where failure had once felt certain. "One last run, boy," he whispered, fastening the reins. The stallion tossed his head, restless and eager. Without an audience, without judges, the boy climbed into the saddle. There were no cheers, no announcers, just the rhythm of their breathing. Together, they started to move, slow at first, then faster, the earth vibrating beneath them. From the porch, Thomas watched. He didn't call out, didn't interfere. He only stood there, pipe in hand, watching his grandson and that wild horse move as one. The sight brought back every memory he had tried to bury. Loss, regret, love, all merging into something simple and pure. As Ember galloped across the field, the wind tearing at Luke's jacket, the old man whispered to himself, "That's what freedom looks like." When they finally stopped, Luke slid from the saddle, laughing breathlessly. The storm broke above them, rain pouring down in sheets. Ember reared once, releasing a cry that echoed across the valley, a sound not of defiance, but of triumph. Thomas walked toward them, his hat dripping wet, and pulled Luke into a rough embrace. "You did it," he said. "You finally did it." Luke smiled through the rain. "No, Grandpa. We did. For a moment, the three, boy, horse, and old man, stood together beneath the storm, unbroken and unafraid. Weeks later, when the next Silver Trail Derby came, the opening lap was silent except for the sound of Ember's hooves. Luke Carver rode proudly, the crowd rising to its feet as he passed. No trophies, no prizes, just respect. The story of the wild horse and the boy who never gave up had become legend. And as the sun set over Redstone Creek, Thomas Carver watched from the stands, tears glinting in his eyes. "That's my boy," he whispered. And for the first time in years, the past finally rested, replaced by something stronger. Hope.